All right. Good evening, everybody who's watching. This is Mack Bolen. I'm here with Rob, Sherrill, and go a little early this week. I had a lot of stuff happening over the weekend. We'll just jump right into it. So, Rob, starting off Class 1A.
Most of the 1A news involves Dakota this week. In the span of 5 days, from Tuesday through Saturday, they wrestled four of the top 10 and five of the top 25 in their own classification, in addition to the number one school in 3A. And so this has kind of been how they've structured their schedule in the last few years. Whereas a lot of the Chicago area 3As are starting to wind down a little bit, Dakota's starting to ramp it up. Tuesday, they wrestled Rock Falls and Byron and beat number 5 and number 9 and beat them both handily. They beat Rock Falls 44-14. They beat Byron 54-18. The next night, they wrestled Lena Winslow Stockton and lost 46-20. Also on the same night, they beat West Carroll, which is in the top 25, 46-19. Another double duel against 3A competition on Friday night, which involved them beating Hananiga by a score of 39-21 and then losing to Montini 51-18. And then on Saturday, they had a single duel where they hosted Aurora Christian, and Aurora Christian won that by a score of 43-27. And the big match in that duel was a battle between two of the top three 106-pounders in 1A, with Joel Milan of Aurora Christian beating Maddox Blakely of Dakota by a score of 4-2. That was a really good match. Our pal Flashy, Mike Vest, was the referee for that match.
Good.
So he's getting his feet wet, and he got his feet wet really good on two of the top three teams in 1A on Saturday morning. But Dakota has now wrestled in duels all three of the number one teams in the state. That's kind of what they do. It doesn't matter whether they have a great team or a not so great team. They don't adjust their schedule accordingly. And this is probably in the upper half of the teams they've had in the last decade. Certainly not the best they've had, but they've done very well against a very difficult schedule. A lot of the rest of the 1A schedule, as well as a lot of the 2A schedule, was wiped out by the snowstorm.
Right.
Pretty much anywhere south of Interstate 80, you were not wrestling on Saturday.
Yeah, what was it, like a foot of snow down south?
Yeah. Snow, more as you got towards St. Louis. Quincy tournament was canceled. The Mahomet Seymour tournament was canceled. The U-High tournament was canceled. Now, fortunately for a lot of these teams, Martin Luther King Day is available as a makeup day. And Mahomet Seymour is going to run their tournament on Martin Luther King Day.
Okay.
Rob Ledden told me that 20 of the 25 teams that they had contracts from have recommitted to a makeup on Martin Luther King Day. So they'll still have a great tournament.
Good. That's good.
Another match that was canceled that is going on tonight, and it's going on as we speak, is the CBC Edwardsville match. That was originally scheduled for Friday night, and of course, the snowstorm hit the the worst and the earliest in the St. Louis area. They got about 15 inches on Friday night, and I'm sure you remember hearing all the horror stories about people heading home from work early and not getting home until many of them until the wee hours of the morning. But that match was originally scheduled on to be wrestled at Edwardsville on Friday night. Tonight is their makeup date. So finally, it looks like the third time's going to be a charm for them. And of course, it got postponed last year because they couldn't agree on the growth allowance. And this year, it was on Friday night. The first time it was snowed out, and finally this year they're tonight the two teams among the best in their respective states are finally getting together to go against each other. So that is going on right now, and that's probably the big match going on for tonight. But pretty much there were other events that did go on. The Kewaunee tournament probably was the only wrestling south of I-80 that did go on, and Charlie Eads told me that they only lost 3 teams for that event, so they were able to have a good tournament anyway, and St. Bede won that. Rock Falls won the Amboy tournament. Lake Forest won the Lyle tournament with Nazareth Academy second. And 2 schools that, really have struggled in the recent past, but are probably both having the best years in program history. Seneca and Dwight finished 1-2 at the Reed Custer tournament, with Seneca winning by 5 points. And so it's good to see those 2 schools having great seasons. I mean, Dwight, which probably hasn't won 15 matches in the last 5 years, is 17-8, an honorable mention this year. So really, it's really great to see stories like that. I mean, obviously they've got a feeder program going, same with Seneca, and so there are success stories all over the map.
All right, so moving up to 2A.
Washington won the Illini Classic at Lincoln Way West, and which is an event which actually had schools from all 3 classifications in it. Bishop McNamara and DePaul were in it from the 1A, but Washington won the Illini Classic pretty easily. Bloomington was 8th in that. Lake Forest, after winning their first 28 matches of the year, took their first loss, losing to their old North suburban rival Libertyville, 47-15 on Friday. But they are 28-1. They are still in the 2A top 10. A week after they fell out of the top 25, Freeport was one of the big stories of last week, beating both Sterling and Dixon last Tuesday. So they are not only back into the top 25, but they're back in the highest they've been all season at number 14. And so hats off to them. And as far as tournament action goes, Providence was the highest finishing Illinois team at the Geneseo tournament, which they kind of call the bi-state out there with all of the Iowa teams that are involved. Fort Dodge, Iowa won it, with Cedar Rapids Prairie finishing second. Geneseo finished 11th, and Rock Island, which continues its late season run, finished 7th in that tournament. So good for them. York won the Canelan tournament, and Back of the Yards, which is looking like a pretty good bet to maybe win a regional, won the Roosevelt tournament. So those some of the highlights in 2A this week.
All right. In 3A, of course, we had a lot of stuff going on. Now, Stevenson duels, interesting to note, Huntley kind of rolled through the Stevenson duels. Had some good wins. I know they beat Deerfield.
Huntley beat Deerfield, Yorkville, and Stevenson that day.
Yep.
They lost to DeKalb on Friday.
I was just going to say they ran into a barbed wire on Friday.
Exactly. Yeah. That's a good way to put it.
Yeah. Well, I think it was 44 to 27.
44 to 27 was the final. They did have a 4-1 week. They beat Prairie Ridge on Thursday. So good week for them. And Mount Carmel. Lockport. I was going to say. Yeah. Lost Ramos until the regional with a shoulder injury. Mm-hmm. They continued to roll. They went 5-0 this week. They beat Lamont in a match in the auditorium on Friday night, and they beat Barrington and Glenbard North on Saturday, in addition to Aniqua Valley. So no Ramos, no problem. And DeKalb also had a 5-0 week, an easy 61-9 win over their neighborhood rival Sycamore. Always a big grudge match on Thursday. We already mentioned their win over Huntley, and they beat in their annual quad Libertyville, Conant, and Lyons Township on Saturday. So some good quad action there.
Mike, real quick here, I want to just put something out there, because I think right now DeKalb with a full lineup, they have Fabian Lopez back, Curran's back, because they suffered a little bit of an injury bug at Rex Whitlatch. They had guys out for a while, but with a full lineup, again, my opinion, I think DeKalb in a dual meet setting is probably third or fourth best in the state, arguably. It'd be interesting to see how things go, because once we get to the team sectionals, the regionals, team sectionals, that'll sort itself out eventually. But they're solid, and they've actually got, like at 195, probably one of the few guys in this state that could give Pete Christensen a match.
Well, sure. And yeah, that's probably your state final right there at 195. Those two guys are pretty much head and shoulders above the rest of the field at that weight. Yeah, I do think that that we could certainly say that about DeKalb. We could certainly say that about Lockport. Lockport hasn't been at full strength yet either. Right. And boy, I tell you, look at the top of the chart at 132 in 3A. It's just crazy.
Yeah.
As things stand right now at 132, we have Bolivar, Pacino, Zacconi, Lopez, Bernowski, and Harrier. Wow, what a top six.
Yeah, and I'm going to be brutally honest here. Again, I'm going to eject my opinion. I think Bernowski is probably the second best or first, but I think Bernowski and Bolivar, just based on what I've seen, eye test wise at 132 pounds, those are the two best 132 pounders I've seen in this state so far wrestle.
Yeah, well, we'll see. They've kind of taken turns beating up on each other this year. So you always got to kind of go on the aggregate with these guys, because they all have you know, everybody's beaten somebody and lost
at
to
some
somebody.
point.
And so, it's a weight class where head-to-heads don't necessarily solve every issue. So
No.
it probably you wrestle those guys 5 times, you probably get 5 different results.
Yeah, and that's going to be, well, like you said, I mean, that's going to be a very brutal weight class come the state series.
Yeah, now that and again, and also now that Ford Melton is settled into 126.
Yeah.
And you have Ford Melton, Ragusan, Moulton, and Spencer at the top of that weight class. And there's 4 guys who, on any given weekend, all could win it. So that's and there are guys below them that are going to, win multiple matches at state. So it's getting more and more interesting by the week.
Right. We'll talk about beat the streets, and but before I do that, I want to give a little bit of downstate love to Edwardsville, which is quietly having a really good season, and a head coach, if I'm not mistaken, Wagner is going to be inducted into the
He's going to be part of the Hall of Fame class.
Hall of Fame,
year.
Yeah.
Congratulations to him. Well earned.
Absolutely.
That's a difficult part of the state to be as good as they are year after year after year, and that's a program that's developed a lot of depth. They have great coaching. They have a great facility, and which is of course in use tonight for a great duel. And they're going to be really good for as long as they want to be. I sort of wish we saw them a little bit more. They do. They're doing a lot of out-of-state wrestling these days, which is not a bad thing.
No, it's not
because
a bad thing.
a lot of our other top teams do it. Travel is always an issue for schools down there. They'll be at the Hickman tournament in Central Missouri this weekend, and I expect that they'll probably win that pretty easily. I would, and they are in the Dvorak. They did a great job in the Dvorak this year, finishing 4th. I would love to see what they do at Hinsdale Central, to be honest with you.
Sure.
I think you get I think we would get a better look at them against some of the other Chicago area teams. They do come up for a couple of weekends early in December, and boy, they just hammered the competition they faced. They are not a fluke. They are
they're having a good season.
They not only have a solid lineup, but they are too deep at a lot of the weight classes. So somebody goes down, or if they sit somebody, they have somebody to come in that's going to do as good a job as the guy they sit. So
I remember back in the day,
they're doing a great job.
Yeah, and I remember back in the day when they used to come up to the old Conan tournament, the Foyt's Classic, which it's not what it used to be, obviously. Back when you had a lot of the power teams in it that were at the top of their game, but they used to come up here and compete in what was at the time one of the 2 toughest early season tournaments in the state.
Yeah, I'm kind of glad they're not doing that, because as much as I like those Thanksgiving weekend tournaments, they're kind of a throwaway date for a lot of these teams, just because so many guys are missing from football. So many guys are getting down to weight, or they're being given time off for whatever. You see some of these teams you see come to these tournaments with maybe 8 or 9 or 10 guys, and I'm thinking, boy, wouldn't it be nice if we could have this tournament a week or 2 later?
Right. Well, and on that note, it looks, from what I've heard from Corey Haddad, who's the tournament director, the Ironman is actually going to back up a week.
I think that's
I think it's great.
I don't think that could hurt.
I think it'll help because, like you mentioned, a lot of those upper weights, those guys are just coming off a football season. And like you said, you get teams that show up with guys, either they don't bring them or they're just really not in wrestling shape yet. And I think pushing it back a week, to that, I think 13, 14 December instead of that first week in December is really going to help a lot of teams as far as being able to field a full lineup.
Yeah, it is a calendar issue. I mean, in Illinois, we start our season earlier than most states do. Indiana starts about when we do, but as you get farther to the Northeast, those states are going later with their football playoffs. Those states are starting their seasons later, and for a lot of those Ohio and Pennsylvania schools that compete in the Ironman, that's their first competition of the year.
Exactly.
So they are very rusty, and they're in the same situation that we're in with those Thanksgiving tournaments where you're still kind of feeling out what in the world you got to put in your lineup.
Yeah.
So So I think that's probably a good thing for them to do. Because that first week of December is season starter for a lot of those teams. And it hasn't even started yet in New Jersey. New Jersey is the latest starting state. And they're not starting till the week before Christmas. So so when you're looking at the Ironman, you're looking before their season even starts. So what you think, gee, the Beast of the East is really late, but that's the season opener. It would be the season opener for the New Jersey schools that are in it.
So going to 3A and just kind of to tie up, because we talked about last week, and you look at, you had Montini that ran out to the Doc Buchanan and then, of course, did the dual meet thing. Oak Park River Forest competed in the Clash, came back. Both Montini and Oak Park River Forest wrestled in duels earlier in the week. But then, we had the huge Beat the Streets challenge that they hosted at OPRF in the field house. Great turnout. For those of you, maybe if you didn't get to see it, it is archived on Track Wrestling. There were some phenomenal matches. And, of course, the kind of the for lack of a better word, exhibition that they put on the Greco with Kamal Bey. It was supposed to be Ellis Coleman. He had to have not minor knee surgery, but there was no way he could compete in it. Last second fill-in, Kendrick Maple came out, and they put on a really spectacular, it was very athletic, almost gymnastic type. Each guy doing different throws and taking turns, and people had a little placard to hold up, red or blue, who they thought executed the move better. It was a great evening. And every single team competing in it was nationally ranked.
Right.
And Poway, California, came in and, they wrestled well, but they had a rough day. They went 0-4.
Well, they did. I'll tell you what, though, they did better than I thought they would. I thought this was a major rebuilding year for Poway. Yeah. This Poway team is no joke. I mean, I probably have more Poway guys in my national rankings this year than I've had in several years, and that's with Dominic Mata no longer being there.
Right, because he also bailed to where.
4 Poway guys in my national rankings.
Go ahead and say, where's Mata at? Where's Mata at right now?
They're number 24 and probably moving up.
But I mean, what school did he go to now?
He's a player. and given how good,
throw that in there because it's just hilarious.
Given how good a student he is, he's probably staying out of trouble.
Yeah. I just, just one of the, when we talked about the Ferraris, but you mentioned Mata, and I just had to throw that out there because it was just one of those things.
Yep.
And I personally, dual meet wise, I honestly felt at the beginning of the season, Poway was a little bit overranked. I saw them at the Ironman. They weren't bad, but I kind of had a feeling going into that Beat the Streets dual meet wise, they were going to be in for a tough day. Oak Park River Forest went in first day, their 160-pounder out, who had just come back in the lineup prior to the clash, and then couldn't wrestle because of a concussion protocol. And then they had a slam that, one of those calls, but they were able to overcome it and beat Poway. And they actually wrestled very well against Bergen Catholic. Two close matches could have made the difference in the duel. Lake Highland Prep was a team that impressed me, though, and I gotta,
they were definitely the surprise of the day for me.
Absolutely. Well, a lot of people
they've had some days when it's kind of been Bazakis and the Rivera brothers,
right,
and not Gels, but that was not the Lake Highland we saw on Saturday.
No, and it was funny too because I talked to Mike Palazzo, and he was saying, well, he felt like they didn't. He said, oh, well, the national rankers don't give us any respect. He said, well, you know what? We came in here today, and people didn't think they had that kind of balance in a dual meet situation, but they were solid.
Let me remind Mr. Palazzo that that Lake Highland has never been lower than 7th in my rankings.
Oh, and you saw how low they were ranked though on some of the other rankings, so to speak, and
I'm not. I'm not. You don't have to sell me on Lake Highland. I know what they're. I know the kind of coaching they have, and I know.
Oh yeah. And we're talking about a guy, who when he left here and he was state champ for Glenbard North, wrestled at University of Indiana, went down to Florida, didn't even plan on coaching wrestling, ended up, and what he has done with that program. Sure. Basically building it from nothing into where they're at right now is just amazing.
Yeah, now I have to, but my MVP for Lake Highland, MVW, OW, whatever you want to say, MVW for sure.
Yeah.
For Lake Highland on Saturday was probably their 106-pounder. Danny Nini, who
he was good.
I think he. I had some fairly high expectations for him this year after winning the state as an 8th grader last year, and through the Beat the Streets, he did not have any what you would call big wins this season. Now, given the schedule they wrestle, you can probably excuse that.
Mm-hmm.
But when you look at the guys he beat on Saturday, he pinned Andre Gonzalez from Poway, who's in the middle of my top 25.
Right.
He shut out Kangro from Bergen Catholic, who's in my top 25.
Right, Kangro, good. Yeah, he's ranked.
Major Nagila. And beat Nick Gonzalez. I mean, that's four big time major league wins for a guy I didn't expect a whole lot from going into the day. And obviously that made a big difference, certainly in the Montini match.
Sure.
And it's probably as well as some of the other matches.
Yeah, and Buzakis.
Nini is my MVW for Lake Highland for sure.
Yeah, Buzakis pretty much wrestled like I expect. I mean, he was phenomenal.
Yep.
He was good, and of course the Bergen guys. I watched Robert Howard, who was just amazing. Also, Kid Russell's just with a physical. He's physical. He's got a deep gas tank, a high motor. I was very, very impressed with him. And to see all those teams in the building, and it was a long day too. You expect
5 rounds. That's tough.
Yeah, 5 rounds with 5 teams.
5 rounds.
Quad,
teams. But you're not going to have boom, 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 boom.
No.
like you do in a lot of quads.
And the other thing is, like if you look at results, you look at matchups. Like Oak Park gave Bergen a very tough match. I mean, they were, again, I say maybe one or two matches. Bergen blew out Montini. Montini lost very close to Lake Highland Prep, and Lake Highland Prep hammered Oak Park. Again, you talk about those matchups, yeah, and that's the nature of dual meets. And in the final dual meet with Oak Park River Forest and Montini, a lot of juggling going on, and I would say hats off to Izzy for being able to make the subtle changes, take a forfeit here, but then bump a couple of guys up who got big wins, and was able to move his lineup and get the favorable matchups and ultimately, of course, get the win. And
well, obviously these two guys have a state final rematch in their future, so there's a little bit of posturing going on, see what they could get away with, see what they can't, see what see what kind of whether I can take advantage of this matchup, or maybe I'd better not try that, that kind of thing. So there is a lot of I'm sure there was a lot of going to school on both sides in that match.
Oh, sure. So looking, obviously, we have the Chicago Catholic League Championships coming up this weekend. The Husky Invite comes up this weekend. But go back real quick. I want to talk about individuals. So let's start at Class 1A. Any guys in particular that stand out to you in 1A?
Let's just pull up the chart and we'll see. Of course, I already mentioned it. We're starting with 1A now. 106, we have already had a match between number 1 and number 3 just this past week, with Milan of Aurora Christian beating Blakely of Dakota. And so that order is pretty well set, with Milan, Andrew Herbst of Oregon, who already also has a win over Blakely, and Blakely number 3. Couple of the guys, 113, the Porta sectional is really shaping up as maybe the toughest sectional in the state at any weight, because you have the defending champion at 106, Monty Gregory of El Paso. The runner-up at the same weight from Hayworth, Levi Newlieb. A great freshman from Illini Bluffs, Cameron Clark. All the runner-up at 106 from Gibson City, Cale Horsch. 3 other state qualifiers in Zach Foote from Cap Point Central, and Ethan Matlock from Leroy, who's back at the same weight. So that's shaping up to be a really tough one. A couple other guys who are back at the same weight from last year, Jacob Milliman of Oregon and Cade Keeps of Mount Carmel, who are both at state.
But looking across in 1A, just looking across all the weight classes, 2 or 3 guys in your mind that are standouts. Not every weight class, but just, if you had to go through all the weight classes and just look at maybe 2, 3, 4 guys that really stand out in 1A at their specific weight class.
Okay, I'm gonna name 2 guys. Could get to 3, but the 2 guys I'm gonna name are Ezra Elliott from Hoopston at 138. He is he's been at 45 and 52 most of the year, and he's dominated everybody at 45. He's dominated everybody at 52. He's back down to 38 now. Wow. I think he wins 38 easily. Elliott is really close to my national top 25 at that weight class, and if he dominates the rest of the year like he's dominated so far, he could make it into my top 25 at 138.
Nice.
the two state another Brandon Hazelton of Prairie Central has been dominant at 195. He hasn't had the level of competition that Elliott has, but because 195 is not a terribly strong weight class, it's got a really good solid top six, four of which are at Byron. So that's going to be a very tough sectional at that weight class.
Ouch.
But Hazelton has been dominant like you would expect. And heavyweight is also shaping up to be real interesting because we have two state champions at the top. Ian Kuehl from Lena Winslow Stockton, who won the weight last year, and Logan Lee of Orion, who won at 220 2 years ago and was injured last year and was injured a good bit of this year, but is now back in. And that weight class is very strong at the top as well with three of the top four at Byron there. But if I'm picking an OW in 1A right now, it's Ezra Elliott until proven otherwise.
All right. So in 2A, looking at the weight classes and your top guys, two or three, who would be your standouts in 2A?
I think Luke Luffman is probably at the top of the list for Urbana.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Although I'm going to tell you, it's very hard for me to differentiate between the five best guys from Washington. If you and there I'm talking about Henriksen at 113, who should win it.
Yeah.
Kate at 120, who should win it. Brody Norman at 126, who should win it. Jared Head at 160, who should win it. And obviously Jace Punky at 190.
Yeah, right. Punky, yeah.
Who should win it again, down 2 weight classes from where he was last year. I think that's 5 state champs, looking at it right now. Yeah. And, if I have to pick between those guys, it's probably between Head and Punky.
Yeah.
Look at if I throw an underclassman into it, it's probably Cape. But boy, Norman has had a great year. Norman has wins over Cameron Johnson from Aurora Christian. He's beaten Spencer. He's beaten Ben Anderson. So he's he's split with Spencer. Okay. So and his only other loss is to Moulton. So
that's Moulton a Lockport, of course.
But looking down the line at 26, it's Norman and Dean Hamidi from Joliet Catholic in the same weight class. That's probably the best state final we've got right now, with the best of the weight classes where we have a 2-man race. Maybe the other one that's in that boat is at 160. Between Head and Dylan Connell from Marion Central, who was a defending state champ himself. But Head's my number one guy there until proven otherwise. It'll be a great state final there.
Sure. And then moving up to 3A, of course, we got Pete Christensen, who, for 195-pounder wrestles more like a lightweight, and is I know on some of the rankings he's already jumped up to number 1. Had a big win over Cardenas.
Christensen.
Yeah, Pete Christensen. Pete Christensen, yeah.
He's now split with Cardenas. Of course, they wrestled at the Ironman, and they wrestled at the Doc Buchanan. Doc Buchanan, and where Cardenas won, and then they wrestled at Beat the Streets, where Christensen won.
And Christensen won at the Beat the Streets 3-1. Yes.
Yes, he could easily jump up to number 1 with Ferrari now out of the picture.
Ferrari's jumping up to 220 from what I've heard already.
Ferrari, Ferrari, 220 is obviously a hole for Bergen Catholic, as we saw over the weekend. But
I look in 3A.
That's only going to be an option for Bergen Catholic for the rest of the regular season.
Right, until obviously he can't wrestle in the state series.
Be able to use it either in the state duels or in the state series. So,
and we've got Chumley, who's been phenomenal this year.
Yeah, I mean, Chumley is not a guy who I would have looked at as being one of our elite kids going into the season, but obviously the win over Saunders changes all of that. And he's lost only to Anderson of Pennsylvania and Kale Valencia, and those are two highly ranked guys nationally. So
well, pretty much everybody's lost to Ryan Anderson, but
right, at least this year.
Yeah,
the guy
this year.
Now, the other guy that I would look at as somebody that I've always I've felt since his freshman year that his time was coming, and I think his time may be here now, is Luke Odom.
Oh yeah, well Odom's been
138.
Yeah, absolutely for Edwardsville.
You look at what he's done this year.
Mm-hmm.
He's beaten. He hasn't wrestled Nolan yet, but he's beaten Dado. At the Cheesehead, he just hammered Hunter Lewis of Stoughton, Wisconsin, who was in my top 10 nationally. And last week he shut out. He went up to 145, and he shut out Max Christoph 11-0. So, Luke Odom is up to the top 10 in my national rankings now at 138, and deservedly so. He's a guy that I could easily see him being our best kid next year potentially.
Sure, I would also throw out, of course, Jake Rundle, who had a couple losses at 120. And Powerade, controversial match, but I mean every time I've seen him clash, made the all tournament team again, blew through and beat a nationally ranked kid from Bergen, Kayal at 113. He probably going to repeat 113 pounds.
Oh yeah, I don't think there's any question about it. I mean, I don't begrudge the loss to Herrera Rondon, because Herrera Rondon has had a tremendous season. He was a little bit of a surprise making their state finals in Pennsylvania last year, but he has really followed it up with a spectacular sophomore season, and he's the only guy that's given Figueroa any kind of a match this year.
True.
And Figueroa has gone down to 106. Well, yeah. I mean, I think Figueroa could have won the California States very easily at 113. Sure. He could obviously win any national competition at 113, but they're trying to win the state, and that means being able to get Lujan back down to 113. So Figueroa agreed to go down to 106. So we'll see. And they got a great freshman at 120, Joey Cruz. So we'll see. Yep. I'm sorry, he's at Clovis North.
Clovis North,
I get my section schools mixed up here. But they're trying to win the state or get a team trophy, and their best chance is with Figueroa at 106 and Lujan at 113. So if they both win it, which could easily happen out there, they'll give schools like Buchanan and St. John Bosco a run out there.
Yep. Also got to mention, obviously, Abe Assad, who's, again, just been absolutely dominant. I watched him wrestle at the clash. Nobody even close to him. This is always a
tough task in 3A because there are so many.
There's so many good. Yeah.
they're this is how it is in 3A every year. The number one guy, and and a lot of guys times below my number one guy is likely to be in my national top 25. That's
Sure.
not the case in every weight class this year, but it certainly is in the case of Assad, the case of Christensen, the case of Odom, the case of Rundell. And,
I would say Styles too,
and Sotelo of Marmion.
and Sotelo. Yeah, absolutely. Sotelo having a great year, 106.
So it's a typical year as far as really good guys from Illinois is concerned, and obviously when you get to weight classes like 126 and 132, they are so deep,
loaded.
It's hard to identify a number one guy.
Just
because
loaded.
You're going 4, 5, 6 deep at those weight classes with guys who are state champion caliber kids.
Absolutely. And one of the things, I point out, because we do talk a lot about the team stuff, but when you look at the all-tournament team at the Clash this year, Illinois was very well represented.
7 guys.
7 guys, and, Ferrante, and from different schools, a lot. You had Ferrante, 170 pounds from Huntley. Obviously, Abe Assad, we mentioned Rundle already. I mean, Nolan from Sandburg, who beat a nationally ranked kid from Thompson, Alabama. I just very, very the team performances were great, but a lot of the individual performances by Illinois wrestlers on a national stage have been very impressive.
Yeah, look at Washington with 5 guys that went 6-0. And those were the 6 guys I was talking about.
Right.
5 guys I was talking about previously: Henriksen, Cape, Norman, Head, and Punky. So I think it's odds on. We got 5 state champs there. Obviously, Norman's going to have a real battle with Hamidi, but we'll get a preview of that at the sectional at Geneseo because they both feed in there. So
I got to mention
they're automatically going to be on different sides at the state because they'll come from the same sectional.
Yeah, I got to mention 2 of the DeKalb guys too. A healthy Fabian Lopez, and of course 195 pounds.
Right. So, and he is.
I think probably the only 195 pounder in this state that can give Christensen a match.
He has a win over Punky this year. So that's that's a credential for him. I believe I've got him up to number 11 in my national rankings now. So
I think that's I think on most of the national rankings he's in the top 20 or top 15. I mean, in the top 15.
Right. Yeah, just a couple of spots ahead of Punky. So.
Yeah. So coming up, obviously, one of the biggest events here in this state is the Chicago Catholic League Championship. Can Mount Carmel or Marmion Academy challenge Montini?
Well, it's going to be, as usual, it's going to be a question of how many weights they can score at. And, I think Mount Carmel is the team with the best chance of doing that. You're not going to beat Montini unless you have 14 point scores. I think it's certainly through the lower and middle weights, Mount Carmel's got that. I don't know in the upper weights whether they have enough to get a whole lot of points. They might get some at 220. They'll get some at 182. I mean, 195 and heavy are going to be, are going to be a challenge for them. So we're just going to have to see about that. But looking at the schedule for this week, we mentioned the CBC Edwardsville match tonight. couple of the big match tomorrow night is LaSalle Peru at Rock Falls. A couple of top 12 teams in their respective classifications there. Dakota's at Stillman Valley tomorrow night. Some good matches Thursday. The Bloomington Normal Inner City is going on at Normal Community on Thursday, starting at 5 o'clock. Leroy goes over to Petersburg Porta for a duel involving two top 25 1A teams. Rock Falls is at Sterling. There is a even though they're in different classifications, that's a huge rivalry grudge match, and that takes place on Thursday. Rock Falls at Sterling. The big match in the or one of the big matches in the Nick 10 going on Thursday with Harlem at Hononegah. Antioch is at Grays Lake Central in a battle of top 15 2A teams. The Battle of Rock Island also takes place on Thursday with Rock Island at Alleman. Maybe the first time that I can remember that both schools are ranked. And Lena Winslow hosts Clinton, Iowa, in also on Thursday. Couple matches Friday. Wheaton North is at Batavia in the Duquesne Conference. Orion is at Camp Point Central downstate. Lincoln is at Prairie Central in Central Illinois. And on Saturday, the first weekend of our, we've already touched on the Catholic League, which is going to be at Mount Carmel for the second straight year. But Saturday is the major round of conference tournaments. The Central Suburban League is going to be at New Trier. Of course, the CPS tournament, which is instead of Friday and Saturday, it's Saturday and Sunday. The Saturday matches are going to be at Taft up on the north side. And of course, the Sunday semifinals and finals are going to be at Chicago State, as usual. The Interstate 8 conference is at Wilmington. The Lake County tournament Friday and Saturday is going to be at Grant. The Metro Suburban will be at Fenton. The Mid-Illini Conference tournament will be at Washington. Mid-Suburban League is going to be hosted by Schaumburg. The Northern Illinois Big 12 is at LaSalle Peru. The South Suburban is at TF North. The Upstate 8 is at Streamwood. And of course, the Southwest Suburban Invitational. They have some additional schools in it. For instance, Granite City and some other schools outside the Southwest Suburban come up and are part of that. It's the Tom Leahy Invitational now, and it's going to be at Stagg Friday night and Saturday. And Oak Park River Forest, of course, has their tournament on Saturday. Other tournaments downstate are at Leroy, Orion Friday and Saturday, and at Rochester, they're having their tournament on Saturday. Next Monday, of course, snow date for the Muhammad Seymour tournament. That's Martin Luther King Day. Muhammad Seymour tournament will be taking place. So will day 2 of the Illini Central Conference Mega Duels. That'll be at Tolono Unity. They had their day 1 duels as scheduled last Friday. The snow wiped out day 2. They're going to have their day 2 on Monday. And also on Martin Luther King Day, this was a regularly scheduled event. The East Suburban Catholic Conference Mega Duels are going to be held up at Carmel in Mundelein.
Okay.
And that's also some other mega duel events going on Saturday. The Downers Grove South duels, they'll be hosting Wheaton North, Lyons, Lake Park, Zion Benton, Glenbard South, Romeoville, and Rockford East coming in. Antioch has their mega duels. with Harlem, Huntley, the big draw there, along with Freeport, Johnsburg, Wakanda, and Dundee Crown. The Oldie Duels, also on Saturday with Litchfield, Lawrenceville, Mount Vernon, Heron, Benton, Marion, Robinson, and Taylorville all coming in. And some quads going on Saturday down Plainfield North, hosting St. Charles East, Jacobs, and Downers Grove North. The Big 12 duels are going to be at Peoria, Notre Dame. Vandalia hosting Porta, Monticello, and Beardstown, and Chatham Glenwood hosting Mascoutah, Mattoon, and Carbondale. So that's kind of your action for the next to the last weekend of the regular season.
Before we get into regionals, and of course, we'll do our regional preview prior to that.
Sure will.
All right. So, everybody, hope you enjoyed the podcast tonight. Again, if you like it, please go down on YouTube there and click the thumbs up button. Any questions, any requests, and results, send to Rob at
Sherrill3062 at gmail.com, Sherrill3062 at gmail.com. Also, if you know of any makeups for events that might have been snowed out on Saturday that we haven't heard about or publicized, send those to me also at the same email.
All right. So that's going to do it for this evening, and we will see you next week. Everybody, have a good evening. Hope you enjoyed this.